Well, folks, welcome back to Performance Process. I am your host, Ronan McLaughlin, and I'm hugely excited about today's show. What do you think of when you hear the word spy? Maybe James Bond or the CIA? But increasingly, say the word spy to us cyclists, and we might think of the @CyclingSpy Instagram account. This pseudo-anonymous account has become a fascinating source of spotted tech, product leaks, and aero observations. One day it's a new frame, the next it's a new armor texture that he spotted in a screenshot of some race. Always sharp, often first, occasionally blunt, but never identified. If there's an aero gain to be found or a questionable gain to debunk, they've probably already posted about it on the Instagram account. People speculate a lot as to who it might be. Some say it's me. It's not, but then I would say that if I wanted to remain anonymous. Others are convinced it's Dan Bigham. There's even a theory that it's multiple people. Today's episode is a virtual sit-down with the spy, and while it might have been tempting to pick his aero brain on aero hacks and tech comparisons, I wanted to understand the thinking behind the account, this person's own background, and why they keep their name and professional background out of it. Of course, no podcast would be complete without some sort of performance lesson, and what followed was one of the most illuminating conversations we've had on this show. The spy's glimpse into the future of aero, the philosophy of optimization, testing for understandings versus outcomes, and what it really means to chase speed through knowledge is one I feel we might only fully appreciate when we look back in years to come. As one final side note before we get into the show, this week's episode won't be the last time you hear from CyclingSpy on Performance Process. In fact, CyclingSpy will be joining us once a month for a dedicated performance tech related episode in which the spy will first discuss their take on a specific topic, perhaps a new aero bike launch or a new aero trend. Then, in the second half of each show, the spy will answer your questions, the listeners' questions. Escape Collective members can submit their questions for the spy at escapecollective.com/hello. You land on that page, there's a couple of options. Choose the Performance Process bucket, and I will find your questions there. That said, we simply can't answer questions like which TT helmet will work best for me, or individual specific bike fitting or aero position questions. With that in mind, try to keep questions focused on topics and trends that will broaden our collective understanding, and ideally a voice note of around about 1 minute is what we're looking for. So without further ado, CyclingSpy, if that is your real name, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, happy to be here.
Good. I think the best place to start with here, because there is so much speculation about who you might be, is with maybe just a good old fashioned game of guess who. And I've got a list of questions here. We can tick off the faces as we go along. But perhaps the best one to get started with is: are you male or female?
I think it's quite easy to say I'm male. Not that necessarily narrows it down too much.
Well, it does add a little.
In a male-dominated sport, in a male-dominated industry. So
it's. If I'm honest, that question is more so that when I accidentally say he, that listeners know that I am correct in using that pronoun. Next question: what's the furthest you've ever ridden in 1 hour?
More than 50k, but I won't say if that's in a bunch, or if it's on a time trial, or on a track, or if it was more than 50k.
More than 50 kilometers. Wow, I was really expecting that to narrow it down, but actually that doesn't. No, I was expecting that to eliminate someone, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate that person. What's the most elevation you've ever achieved in a single ride?
I checked on my Strava, actually, before starting recording this, and it was just over 3,000 meters.
Okay.
Not too much.
We know that you're on Strava, and that answers the next question. Are you me?
If I said no, that would sound like something you would say.
Is that a no? It does get to a point that was raised in our Escape Collective members Discord for this podcast, that the speculation was that I was just going to sit down and record a podcast with myself, which I can assure you is not the case.
No comment.
Are you Dan Bigham?
I think Dan is probably he's got enough jobs as is without spending his whole day on Instagram, zooming in on photos, trying to look up, is that a bit of image blur, or is that a new geometry of a bike that is just Tadej Pogacar's leg is hiding just a little bit? I think he's busy enough.
We're not really getting any answers here, but I guess the next question might be: Are you actually multiple people?
No, I'm just one person. I think it's good to keep it as just one person, so it has a bit more of a personal feel. That's something that I definitely wanted to do from the outset when I started the account, just to keep it as one person, so it's a little bit more intimate with people. Well, intimate's maybe the wrong word, but so it's a little bit more personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely does have that to it. I guess that gets us to a question about people. Like, do you judge people by their bar width?
I judge people by if they buy aero bars and then put bar tape all the way to the center. This is how I judge people.
Okay, we're getting a bit of insight here now.
But that's things I've shouted about on Instagram quite a lot. Bar width, I mean, yeah, narrower is better generally, and you see all the pros moving towards that, following probably amateurs first, really. But pros I will judge.
Pros you will judge. Okay, fair enough. Perhaps a couple of questions just to get into some of your own expertise in this, and I'm curious. Does watching your espresso pour in the morning make you think of Reynolds numbers?
If it's a good pour, then. If it's a bad pour, then it's that could be better. We're a bit transitional. But if it's a good pour, then it's a good, nice, low Lamina Reynolds number coffee pour. Quite satisfying from a few different levels.
I have to say now, I'm skipping a lot of these questions because you're giving very, very considered answers, which I'm really enjoying. But we might wrap up with one final question, and I'm curious. Like, your identity is obviously unknown. You presumably take some steps to protect that. Is it protected by the Official Secrets Act, or do you just use like a VPN?
Yeah, it's protected by Instagram's privacy settings. There's not too much in the way. Some people have successfully guessed it. I think you are probably the quickest one to guess it. Which would be quite easy if CyclingSpy is you. You just guess as yourself. But if it's not, then I was quite impressed as how quickly you got it. So yeah, people are free to guess. There's nothing in the way, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very keen not to take the credit for what is a fantastic account. So I will once again reiterate that I am not the cycling spy, which of course is something I might say if I was the spy. All right, mystery solved or not, as the case may be. Either way, no matter who you really are, what we have to say is that the account is legit. Some of the insight that you share on there is very, very valuable and very insightful, and certainly the community, the cycling community, and especially our Escape Collective members have sent lots of hugs and kisses in appreciation of the quote, yes, in appreciation of the account. Truth is, you clearly do know your stuff, and that's what makes the account so interesting. Can you tell us, how do you know what you know, and what your background is in this space?
So I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I have worked in Formula One with Formula One teams. I've worked in cycling a lot, developed methods of visualizing aerodynamics in wind tunnels, and in CFD, I've developed lots of products with lots of brands. And my products have achieved lots of world records and Tour de France stage wins, and yeah, generally found good development. And
you're also bound by quite a few NDAs, I understand.
Yeah, if NDAs are proportional to trustworthiness in engineering and aerodynamics, then hopefully I should rank quite highly.
You mentioned a lot of things there. Do you have a specific area of expertise that you can share with us?
Making people go fast.
not giving too much away. Okay. Well, we definitely have a lot to get into here, but we're also balancing this. You have the account anonymous for a reason. We're trying to not give too much away, but paint a picture for the listener as to why the account is so trustworthy, and also we're also going to get into in more detail how we can rethink some of the questions we have around making riders faster. Before we do that, perhaps that's a good question that perhaps you can answer: is why keep it anonymous?
So I get lots of pieces sent in by people in teams and in brands looking to show off or try and leak prototypes and things. And I think if people knew who I was and where I worked, they might not be so forthcoming in sending things through. So I think the account would be worse if it wasn't anonymous and if it was just someone posting images on their personal account. And it's more fun that way. Otherwise, if people knew who I was, this podcast probably wouldn't happen.
I beg to differ. I think this podcast might have happened much sooner. It took me a while to wrap my head around how we do a podcast with an anonymous, I was going to say person, let's say account. So I think, knowing a little bit more about your background that we can't share here, I certainly would be leaning on you as a source a lot more often if you were public. But I mean, it's also one of the things that makes the account so interesting, and you're not really afraid to call out some of the nonsense. I'm interested to, like, if you're already in this space and you're already having those conversations, and that, what motivated you to actually start the account? What's the backstory there?
As I said, in my experience, I've worked in Formula One, and there were lots of tech journalists and sort of spy accounts for Formula One. So Formula Aerodynamics on Instagram. I'm sure some of the people that follow me also follow Formula Aerodynamics. And it was just, they have that in Formula One. They didn't have that in cycling. So here we are.
And crucially, you know what you're looking at. You can spot these things, and you know what to share and what to talk about.
And there's obviously big cycling magazines. I'd probably say you're one of the best at spotting the niche things and small performance differences. But a lot of the large magazines focus on the big shiny things that they can sell, like a bike or a handlebar or a wheel, when they might not make the most difference to how fast the rider can go.
Mm-hmm.
So I look to try and fill that small gap. And also, being purely on Instagram means that you can get onto these things really quickly. You can quite often be the first to launch something. You're probably one of my biggest competitions in getting on things first. So if someone else has posted something first or published something first, I generally probably won't post about it, just because being first on something is part of the account, feeling and everyone in the community feeling like they're in on something that no one else knows about.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly an allure to breaking news like that. I like to think we work well together. Like, we often kind of talk about stuff and that, and unfortunately, I don't get as much time to dedicate to these spotted articles as I once did, and that's with the focus more so being on the podcast and written articles around it now. So we may well be competition. I hadn't thought about that, but I'm delighted to see that the account exists. I do think, though, you kind of, you're pushing a lot of the cycling media, ourselves included, to be better at spotting these things and be better at, explaining them and breaking them down, and, not just saying, here's what they're using, but also here's why they might be doing this. What role do you envisage for the account? Is that something you've considered?
A little bit. I have lots of junior riders message in asking for advice and things, and that makes me happy to do. Answer their requests, try and help them out, because cycling is very expensive now, and especially as a junior trying to make it's really, really hard, and they have to sacrifice a lot. And if they don't have the money to do all this wind tunnel and testing and things, then especially in the time trials, if you have a natural talent for a time trial but don't have the money to invest, you might not get noticed, even if when you are picked up by a professional team and you have money put towards your development, you might be the world's best, but because you didn't have the funding or advice as a junior, you might fall through that gap in the spotting process. So I think a little bit of that helping out, but I think it's just a nice community for real tech geeks to just talk and discuss really small things that haven't really been talked about before. That's all the most fun thing.
I can see, like, not quite as often as that, but I get those questions as well. And you sense the sort of the fear of missing out from these young writers, and their, the idea that, that a brand will come out with a new product, and if they don't have it, they're missing out. But it sounds like you can sort of break that down for them and maybe explain that it's not necessarily going to make them faster in some cases.
Yeah, I just try to offer the advice that I can and just try and not teach. I'm not saying that I am like the biggest authority on aero, but just offering my opinion and trying to help if I can. And then saying, honestly, if I can't help with something or I don't know. I mean, the problem with aerodynamics, as you well know, is it's so personal, especially with the textures and textiles. It's so depends on each rider and their position and how fast they're going. But I think a lot of people getting into it don't necessarily appreciate that completely perfectly. So you have people saying, what should I wear for my triathlon? I'm going to average 40 kilometers per hour. And I say, and my response is, well, where do you want to be fast? Is it flat? Is it downhill? Is there lots of climbing? Because you shouldn't wear something aero for 20 kilometers an hour if the descent is going to be 60 for a long amount of time. You should put your efforts into certain scenarios. So just little bits of helpful advice like that I try to do.
That makes me think of another Guess Who question, and we often say you can't see aero, but based on some of the things you're saying, I'm wondering if you can see aero.
I'm not Adrian Newey.
Like you mentioned the community there a few times as well, and to your credit, like you are very open at acknowledging when someone has shared an item that they have spotted with you. Is your inbox just inundated with those questions that you just mentioned, and also like completely random stuff that people spot all the time?
Yes. Yes, I get a lot of messages about all sorts of things. So the last post was about the new Colnago bike that Pogacar was seen sitting on top of at some event in Monaco, and had lots of messages about that and lots of people offering their opinions. And I struggled to find the difference between the V4 and the V5 RS and see if there are any differences. But I have lots of people sending things in and also going out and doing more work and actually comparing the geometries of different bikes and helping out. And the account wouldn't run without those people. And there are lots of people that regularly send things in and are sending in things every couple of days, and it's amazing. And I'm very grateful to those people because the account wouldn't exist without them anymore.
I mentioned on our Escape Collective Performance Process channel on Discord that you'd be joining the show this week, and one of our members, Christoph M, asked, like, can you put any sort of estimate on the ratio of stuff that you have spotted yourself versus what comes in through the community?
So when I started the account, it was everything was things I'd spotted myself. But if I've spotted it, someone else has spotted it and already sent it into the account. Nowadays, there are enough people following in the community that I'm, normally not the first person to spot something and send it in. So I think nearly everything is sent in by followers and fans and people in the community. And if you see on a post there's no credit, it's because they asked to not have credit or keep anonymous, which goes back to the thing I was talking about earlier, where actually if people knew who was behind CyclingSpy, they might not send something in.
But I mean, they're also like I think, not Christoph's thinking here, but I think the assumption from some people might be there that, oh, he just gets sent everything. But you get sent everything because you can then, any of us can see a picture and spot something is new. But to explain why the differences are between the new version and the old version, or what they're trying to achieve, or that's the insight that you can provide then through the account.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. Lots of people ask, is this new? What is it doing? And lots of things I don't know the answer to. A few things I can guess, and some things I do know the answer to. And I try to just say as much in the post that eventually comes out. So in lots of posts, there are questions asking what people think, because something looks new, but other people have different ideas on what is new or what something may or may not be doing.
Actually, a couple more questions that came up in the Discord channel when I mentioned you'd be joining us was Robert Chung, who came up with the Chung method, the virtual elevation method of aero testing. He asked if there is any chance teams and brands are actively use stuff knowing that you'll spot it or you'll post about it as like a disinformation tactic to mess with other teams' minds.
I feel quite honoured that Robert Chung would send something in. It makes me feel quite good to be recognised by someone like that. I don't know is the answer. I think if someone sends something in or I spot something that looks new, but I have either tested it before and know it doesn't make a difference, or think it's a waste of time, then I won't post about it because I think it's a waste of time. So if they have put things on that don't make a difference, then I probably think it's a waste of time and won't put too much time into it. So I think maybe, I don't think so. I think lots of teams have enough things to do and not enough time to do it, that they're probably trying to focus on going fast, even if some of the teams aren't necessarily doing a very good job of that.
I think the more plausible flip side of that question is, do you think that maybe with the notoriety that the account now has, that teams and brands and manufacturers are actively not using kit because they know it'll get spotted and it'll get shared on the account, and so they save it for the specific event that their A goal for the season or whatever?
Maybe. I haven't heard of that yet. But I think it will start happening more and more anyway. Even if I wasn't posting about it, I think it would be happening more and more. People are having to get more creative with their ideas. So like the casque visors with the gurney flaps on, I think that sort of thing now would only be introduced in something like a Tour de France and kept secret for a very long time before, and not be caught in an Instagram post with Geraint Thomas that we can leak before the race starts. I think they'd be keen on keeping some things like that secret for longer. But going back to my earlier point, I think actually lots of brands try to leak things early on purpose, hoping that it gets spotted. So I think Specialized have been a case in point this year and at the end of last year, in that their shoes, their wheels, their tires have been very obvious for a very long time. And everyone has been doing marketing for them for the last 6 months before the product was released. And I haven't had anyone from Specialized try and stop me. I've had lots of Specialized dealers send things in saying and confirming that we have new shoes coming. These are what colors they are. We have new wheels coming. This is what size they are. This is how much they weigh. This is how many spokes they have. So I think more often I see the opposite. But for some things that make a really big difference, if it's really, really new, they might save it for a big race. Less because of me, perhaps more because of the UCI. If you see recently, going back to the casque visors, those being banned and they've been used before, if they've been used for the first time in like a prologue time trial for the Tour and they pass the prototype approval by the UCI probably aren't going to disqualify them because they don't like a new helmet after they finished the stage. So it was like when Dan Bigham used the shin tape on the Danish riders at the Olympics. First time it was seen was in the qualifying round, and then Hugh Shy has a quiet word to say, no, you can't do that, but we won't disqualify you for doing it because it was legal, but we don't like it. I'm not as influential as the UCI.
Does that mean you're not the UCI? Who knows?
That would be a real conspiracy if I was actually Andre. Making things to try and force the UCI to change their rule book into something that people can actually work with.
Final question on that sort of topic. Do you ever get, like you mentioned, you never heard anything from Specialized directly, but do you get feedback or even like nasty messages from industry insiders when you have spotted and commented on something?
A couple times I have more often have nice messages from brands. So the breathing sensor that Visma have been spotted using, I got some very nice messages from those guys. That was really nice. The one, say not nasty, but slightly controversial one would be the Astana on the old bikes that was spoke about on your podcast, on the Spin Cycle podcast. That was slightly controversial, but it wasn't a nasty message. I think Astana were just trying to not embarrass their new sponsor, which I think is fair. Running a professional team isn't lucrative financially. Nobody makes lots of money out of it, apart from some riders' salaries. And I'm try to be on the side of the riders and team staff, because if a sponsor pulls funding because of some controversy, then people might lose their jobs and things. And this is just for fun. This account, I don't benefit from this in any way. So I try to avoid that. And they were quite easy to deal with, quite happy. But yeah, that happened.
Given that you have to remain anonymous, I think you would have to decline anyway. But I'm kind of curious when it gets to the point that you actually start getting invited by brands and manufacturers to like industry launches and stuff. And maybe you can't go in person, but maybe you can attend virtual presentations and stuff.
I've met people from brands and had conversations with them in a professional manner as a result of CyclingSpy, but never had any in-person invites. But that has sort of happened.
And I mean, listeners might be thinking, I haven't asked the obvious question, like, where do you work? That's intentional, because I think that would also
pass.
Yeah.
No comment.
We haven't asked that question yet. Yeah. Moving along, I mean, the temptation with this episode would have been to sort of, with your expertise in that, sort of get into demystifying aero again and get some of your insight or your aero hacks, and we can certainly get to that if you have stuff that you want to share. But I think it might be more valuable to sort of instead focus on an element of optimization that we don't often hear. And a highly regarded expert, again, I'll let this person remain anonymous, but they said something to me once, and I think it's the perfect way to frame the next part of this conversation. That person said, the media and public generally want to know what's fastest, whereas we want to know how to continually develop faster equipment. So tests are structured to understand more about the physics than just the direction and magnitude of a delta. Getting the physics right makes developing faster stuff a whole lot easier. Otherwise, you end up scratching your head a lot. What do you make of that?
All right, folks, sorry, that's where we're going to call it a day for our non-members here. Escape Collective members can enjoy the rest of the podcast, where CyclingSpy gets into some of the really juicy details about his predictions for the future of aero. While we're only at about 10% of peak aero, he breaks down the difference between testing for binary faster versus slower outcomes versus testing for understandings, and why that is so much more beneficial, and a few other juicy tidbits along the way. So if you're not already a member, head over to escapecollective.com/join to sign up now. There's also a written article version of this podcast on the escapecollective.com website, so you can check that out and you can sign up through that article as well. Don't forget, we have more episodes coming up with CyclingSpy in the near future, so if you don't want to miss those, also, Again, head on over to escapecollective.com/join to become a member today.